Hey everyone, I'm Rather Incoherent, and today I want to do a quick thought experiment. I want to go back through each expansion, full expansions including return tos, and see what I think the best card in each set was. I haven't really thought about the game in terms of sets in a while, and I'm curious to see what was really pushing the envelope the most in each set. I'll probably do 1 or 2 honorable mentions on every set, but for now I'm going to get to the grindstone and see what I think was the best in core. Elusive definitely deserves an honorable mention, but I will also say I'm going to look at the tabooed version of the cards. Elusive probably wouldn't have won in its original state. With Taboo, it's not even close. But without Taboo, Elusive was a crazy card that did a lot to make rogues feel like they weren't garbage in the early sets. Obviously, 2-cost teleport anywhere on the map is a little bit crazy, and these days we only give jank bad versions of that to Mystics, never anything close to that with a fast effect and other bonuses. So when I was looking through the core set, I saw Beat Cop 2, and it was the one card from Guardian where it has been a core part of fighting with Guardians forever. And there were a couple of cards like Lockpicks 1 that I saw for other classes, for Scavenging for Survivors, Word of Protection for Mystics. And then we saw Dr. Milan Magnifying Glass Cryptic Research Deduction for Seekers. They came out of the gate swinging, didn't they? They were ready to be broken from the first scenario, from the very first box, and I think I have to give it to Deduction. Deduction is, if any card was the most important and iconic card, it's gotta be Deduction. We see that so much more often than any other card from the core set. We don't refer to fighting allies as beat cops, but we refer to every card with an effect like this as a deduction, right? Deduction's definitely the #1 card out of core set. There are other really impactful cards in there. There are other really strong cards in there. But Seeker was easily the most feature complete in core set, and Deduction is easily the best card. It's 0 experience. Everyone gets it. It's so strong. I don't even need to explain why. If you played the game, you understand why I'm saying Deduction. So getting into Dunwich, I guess I need to explain I'm not including Investigator cards. If I were, there's no honorable mentions, it's just Rex. Rex is the strongest card out of Dunwich. But we're not talking about Investigators today. So I was going through Dunwich and I got Stand Together 3. I was like, I really like that card. I personally think it's one of the best cards in the set, and it's severely underrated and doesn't get built nearly often enough. And when it does get built, it doesn't get built fast enough. They get in scenario 5. Should be buying this way earlier if you can. But I don't think Stand Together 3 was going to win, and then there really wasn't anything else from Guardian I saw. And we're repeating history, because then we got to Seeker, they got Pathfinder, Shortcut, and Deduction. Not only did we upgrade the best card from the core set, we also just gave Seeker movement as an identity, and Shortcut's currently my leader coming out of Seeker for Dunwich. There are definitely some other noteworthy cards from Dunwich. Pete Sylvester hit here. We got Double or Nothing, the only banned card in the history of the game for rogues. And then Mystics got their full suite of spells and started being a real class with Shriveling and Rite of Seeking. I think I'm gonna give it to Shortcut, to be honest. A lot of people upgrade from Shortcut to Pathfinder and view Pathfinder as the better card, but you can shortcut other people. And super high draw Seekers, a Mandy Thompson, well, before the Taboo, a Harvey Walters, anyone that's building specifically for it where they run both Deep Knowledge and Cryptic Research, you can play 2 shortcuts every other turn, every 3rd turn at worst, and you can just give a huge amount of mobility to a character that would otherwise have lacked it, like a Mystic, like a Fighter Survivor. Shortcut's really fundamentally strong, and I'm maybe sort of picking it because it represents giving movement to Seeker. This was that identity's birth. I genuinely think Deduction 2 is not as game-breaking as Deduction 1. The fact that it costs 2 experience is a pretty big opportunity cost. There's a lot of good ways to spend experience in Seeker in general, this is half of a Cryptic Research, for instance. It's obviously very, very good, but in a vacuum, without practice makes perfect in the game yet to duplicate this effect, I do think maybe the best card from Dunwich is actually just Shortcut. With Carcosa, I would say the average power level was a decent drop down from the previous expansions, but mostly while I was looking at cards and thinking they were good cards, there were very few cards where I looked at them and immediately thought this is in contention for best. This is going to be one of the best cards in the set. Stick to the Plan is obviously one of them. This is a core Guardian card to this day, makes your deck more consistent, guarantees your opening economy, to the point that a good chunk of Guardians, they make a moderately cheaper deck, can just run one Ever Vigilant, one Emergency Cache, put them in Stick to the Plan, and that's their entire economy, they're good to go. Like, Stick to the Plan is a very important game-defining card for Guardians, but the reason it might not win, for me at least, is because typically it's less important than your core strategy. As much as I want to live in a world where first upgrade you buy 2 copies of Stand Together 3, and second upgrade you buy Stick to the Plan, realistically that's second and third upgrade at best, because first upgrade you're buying the weapon that does your job, right? Stick to the Plan's very, very good, but I don't think it's going to be the best card out of this set. And while I would argue that just free 12 experience is pretty good, there's no shot that Karen Zobel gets best card in the set, it's just stupid. Really, for me, it comes down to 3 cards. Resourceful is one of them. This is, in my opinion, the best source of Survivor recursion. Even though scavenging has been nerfed, I've never liked scavenging-based recursion. It felt just like always a little bit janky, a little bit like there were too many moving pieces. I never really liked scavenging the way I've liked resourceful. It's just a very, very good card. But so is Warded Protection too. As the game has gone on, I've valued Ward less and less. Like, it's an incredible card, I will never say it's not. But very consistently, the things where I used to feel like Ward was a game changer that made the scenarios tremendously easier, I'm just like, that's a burden you can bear. Sure, you don't want to get hit by whatever devastating Mythos event it is, but it's not going to kill you, you don't have to ward it. And there's a ton of circumstances where a Mystic's going to, say, ward Grasping Hands on themselves, and they're spending 2 experience, a card, and a resource to take 1 horror instead of up to 3 damage. And like, if you average out the math on what they would have actually taken, it's probably around 2, depending on their foot. It might be closer to 1 for some lucky investigators. Ward's really good, but I think the actual value of it is less than the value that you feel it gets. And there's only 1 card in this set that I've been pretending has different text than it does, because I've just been pretending Key of Yis is forbidden. They made it exceptional. Now instead of getting 2 for 5 each, you get 1 for 10, so you better invest in Hydral and backpacks if you're using this. And sure, it's actually a red card because it only works with Pete Sylvester, but +3 to all of your skills is kind of a nuts effect to be wearing around your neck for 3 resources. I think Key of Yis might deserve this, because it's the only card in the set that I pretend doesn't exist, because it's too strong. And I need to play with it again to see if it's as strong as I think it is. Realistically, Stick to the Plan or Resourceful, it's really close. I'm gonna give it to Key of Yis, but I could be wrong about that, just based on how it felt long ago and not how it actually is in gameplay. I need to make a Key of Yis deck and see if it's still disgusting. As we start looking at Forgotten Age, one of our candidates for the victory might be the very first card. It turns out while flamethrowers might be the more remembered weapon from Forgotten Age, Seekers also started fighting with Forgotten Age. At this point in time, they really weren't able to do the stupid stuff with Ancient Stones that would come later. I don't think that'll happen until Mandy double or nutsings Ancient Stones to get it with like 14 charges, but there are definitely Seekers later that make a lot of use of this card, and I'm really just putting it here to note, like, this is apparently the start of Seeker ways of fighting that were kind of egregious. Ancient Stones can do a lot in that regard, but it wasn't really standing a chance of winning against Flamethrower. I would say that Flamethrower deserves to win this. It is the big gun that people think of. It outclasses Lightning Gun, it outclasses Shotgun. The fact that it is so strong is probably part of the reason that big guns has been abandoned as an archetype, is because while they can buff up small guns, they are worried that if that experience is available to a big gun deck, it would become oppressive with a Flamethrower. And they can make other things that have unlimited uses, like Survival Knives, Runic Axe, and Cyclopean Hammers, and those can be competitive, and in my opinion, Runic Axe is actually the best option of fighting outclassing Flamethrower. Flamethrower being this dominant capstone card in big guns, I think is part of the reason they stepped away from the archetype, to give themselves some time to think about how to improve big guns without just stapling power onto Flamethrower. I think Flamethrower is like the point where Guardians became not just the best fighters, but comically the best fighters. I will give an honorable mention though, not like a joke one with Ancient Stones, but a very real one, to Lucky Cigarette Case. This is kind of an important card for rogues. Frankly, you'll see Lucky Cigarette Case a lot more often than a Flamethrower. It's more universally applicable to any role, it costs 0 experience, it's very cheap, it's in an uncontested slot, mostly for rogues. Lucky Cigarette Case is, in my opinion, a less powerful card, but it is still like 9 out of 10 incredibly good. It's just not archetype defining like Flamethrower is. I've gotta say, the power level of cards in Circle Undone really underwhelmed me. I did not want to say Hallowed Mirror was remotely competitive, because like, as much as I like Hallowed Mirror, it's very much a card you put in your deck. It's sort of like Ward, right? Where the value it has is real and it does matter, But at the same time, the actual effect is probably a lot less than it feels like. It's good healing. It's healing that is like relatively cheap, not in a very contested slot for the class it's in. It's very good healing, but it shouldn't be contesting to win this set. Well Connected is here, but Well Connected in isolation, like no big money card is going to win anything in this video, because big money is about getting a critical mass of associated assets that all trigger off the same thing, like Clue Dropper is, where all of them together is such a powerhouse, but individually Well Connected, especially Well Connected Zero, just doesn't do it. Meat Cleaver is a really good card, but part of the problem with Survivor is that they're still using Meat Cleaver like 6 years later, and we haven't grown past this, and their weapon selection's pretty weak. Like, Meat Cleaver is good, but it's not good enough to get this title. It's actually the problem that we can't really do much better than this in Survivor. Now, Occult Lexicon is a card I deeply dislike. I find it personally offensive that Seekers are able to deal so much testless damage so reliably for, all told, not that much investment. But it's worth noting that Bloodright is not cheap. Like, this card, Bloodright, might say 0 cost on it, but it's not. Its cost is equal to the damage it deals, and base Occult Lexicon, it's only dealing 2 damage at a time. Like, Occult Lexicon is good. I will never claim Occult Lexicon is not one of the best cards in the game. But if you are making a character designed to actually deal a lot of damage with Bloodright as part of your game plan, not just like a thing you'll whip out on the very end at the boss, those Bloodrights are going to interrupt your game plan. They cost a lot of money, and you have to build your deck to actually fund those Bloodrights. It's not just free damage, it does have a cost. Oh, it would appear that I'm not getting the full list because it didn't show me the Return to Circle Occult Lexicon 3, which is notably better. But all the same, I really don't think Occult Lexicon gets my best card of the set. My best card of the set is actually something that's kind of offbeat. I'm giving it a Scroll of Secrets, because this is basically Deep Knowledge before Deep Knowledge existed. At this point in time, this is the best draw card that's come out. Seekers and Mystics both really like this. It's 1 cost, gets out of there in 2 turns, and then you can replace it with something else. Scroll of Secrets is really, really powerful, really cheap draw. As long as you don't have to have both your hands occupied, which neither of these classes does, then Scroll of Secrets is some of the best draw in the game to this day. And I think that as much as I like I don't like Occult Lexicon. As much as I like the power level of Occult Lexicon, the fact you have to make deck building concessions to really optimize the card, that's not true with Scroll of Secrets. This is much more universally useful. The same reason that Sigurd Retcase almost beat Flamethrower is the reason that I think Scroll of Secrets is a more powerful card than Occult Lexicon. Although I do think that like Occult Lexicon is a card you can build around and do some much more broken stuff than Scroll of Secrets ever will, I'm not really ranking them in build-arounds. I'm ranking them in vacuums, and Occult Lexicon in a vacuum is not as broken as its top end can be. And since I've just learned that the Return 2s weren't showing up, I'm gonna go quickly check all the Return 2s. Let me tell you, Return 2 core set is not changing it from deduction. That was not a lot of cards, and they really did not change the meta very much at all. And I feel the exact same way about Return 2 Dunwich. This is not gonna dethrone Shortcut. Like, some of these cards are very much playable. They're better than what we saw in core set, but still. Coming over to Return 2 Path to Carcosa, it's looking like we're repeating the same story. Yeah, this is not gonna change my answer. If the best card in this set is the 32 Colt, then what are we doing here? Return to Forgotten Age might be mixing things up pretty seriously. Survival Knife's a hell of a card. I originally gave it to Flamethrower, but then Return 2 came out and posted the first real card that competes with Flamethrower. Survival Knife is unlimited action compression. Flamethrower deals 12 damage a turn. Survival Knife on top of Machete is 8 damage a turn with unlimited bullets. Then on top of that, you can Bandolier in a second Survival Knife to get up to 10. You can use your experience on other things to make your deck more consistent or more powerful in other ways. I don't think Survival Knife dethrones Flamethrower, but I actually think it's very, very close. And these days, I am much more likely to make a Survival Knife character than a Flamethrower character. But Survival Knife didn't capstone an archetype in the same way, so I will let Flamethrower keep the title for Forgotten Age. And with Return to Circle Undone, we have some really important cards, the upgrades to Lexicon and Hallowed Mirror, the upgrade to Well Connected. Sign Magic's a very cool card, even though I don't think it's particularly strong. I think that Occult Lexicon 3, despite being one of those problematic cards in terms of game design, is not in isolation the problem. It's because of Seeker's insane draw and because of Seeker's incredible economy that you can make decks that do really broken things with Blood Rights. And just throwing Occult Lexicon into a normal Seeker deck that didn't plan for the Blood Rights results in a Seeker that encounters a lot of problems with their economy. I don't think Occult Lexicon is actually broken in isolation. I think it's a bad design that's unhealthy for the game that combined with the power level of Seeker in terms of all their resource generation, like that creates the problem. If in a vacuum, I would not look at this and think it is as broken as it really is. Which brings us to Dream Eaters, and I don't need to look any further, it's the first round. This isn't like Flamethrower, where I'm going to be like, oh, let's go look at the rest of Dream Eaters. I don't even need to. This is the best card in the game. I'm not joking, Safeguard 2 is the strongest form of action compression in the entire game. It will pretty much always be 2 resources slotless asset that gives you an action every turn. That's like the minimum result that you will see out of this. And very frequently you will see this giving 2 or even more actions to a Guardian. It is disgustingly strong. This is a slotless 2-cost Leo DeLuca that you can have 2 copies of. I don't know where Safeguard 0 is. I think that's actually, yeah, I can see it off to the side. You can't. It's a Nathaniel Cho starter deck card. If I do starter decks, which I guess I'll do after this because otherwise I'll forget them, that's probably going to be my winner. But I'll go see what Dream Eaters had other than Safeguard 2. Because Safeguard 2 is no contest, very clearly the best card available. Wait, this is actually really funny, right? This is the expansion Tony Morgan came out and they just like didn't print support for him. They printed Delilah and Haste, Garrottwire, and like nothing else had anything to do with Tony Morgan. I guess Old Shotgun, or sorry, Sawed-Off Shotgun did. But like they really did not print support for him. They're like, oh, you know, give him Swift Reload, I guess, in case he uses guns. Don't print too much of that guy, he's great. It's very funny. I want to be clear, Dream Eaters is a really high power level campaign. Segment of Onyx came out here, and even with the taboo dependent on the queen so that you only get 1, there are plenty of ways to put more charges on it. By the way, correlate the contents coming out next expansion might just make Pendant of the Queen oppressively strong again, since it is a great charge-based asset. And then, not only is Pendant of the Queen here, we have Practice Makes Perfect, which, like, yeah, that's absolutely insane. To this day, one of the best cards in the game. They printed Sharp Vision, which is deduction for rogues. We got Spectral Razor and Read the Signs for our mystics. But no, I'm giving it to Safeguard 2. I understand that there are some very good cards. Like Practice Makes Perfect is the only thing in the game I think that really could have competed with Safeguard. But even then, no, absolutely not. Duplicating deduction twice per deck cycle in a class that repeatedly cycles its deck, yeah, Practice Makes Perfect is insane. Safeguard is still better. It is an unreasonable number of actions for an incredibly low cost. This card is incredibly broken. And I'm gonna go look through the starter decks now, see what I can find there. There are definitely some pretty good cards in the starter decks. That's where we got Stand Together level 0, which is one of the best economy cards in the game and the best economy card in Guardian. Burning the Midnight Oil also came out of this. Perception level 2, which is part of that practice suite of cards that really pushes not just the general tempo with Practice Makes Perfect, but the incredibly high draw and Seekers. Farsight really doesn't deserve to be here. It's sort of its own archetype without a lot of overlap elsewhere, and the investment cost for anyone other than Harvey is a little bit too high for Farsight to be good, but it is very powerful. And Pilfer 3 is literally the reason Foot Matters Rogue feels like it has a top end worth playing. So Pilfer 3 is incredible. It's really between that and Safeguard. Those are the only 2 competitors here. And there is not a Guardian in the game that doesn't want Safeguard. For the same reason that I was saying Scroll of Secrets is much more universally good than an Occult Lexicon, Safeguard goes in every Guardian. Doesn't matter which one, doesn't matter what role, you want Safeguard. This is not true for Pilfer 3. This is specifically for Foot Matters characters. It is not for every rogue. And that is why Safeguard is going to be winning not just 1, but 2 of these. Getting into Innsmouth, I suspect there are going to be relatively few competitors because a ton of cards will be taken up with bad Bless support cards that really don't do very much in isolation, and the payoffs for them, other than Ancient Covenant, aren't that great. So in spite of a lot of the set getting eaten up by Bless and Curse cards that really just weren't at a power level to be in competition here, there's still some very good cards in Innsmouth. Unrelenting is one of the best draw cards in the game. If we were ranking the best card in each expansion for Silas, this would very clearly be the winner, but right now, just being a 1 experience, 1 question mark, draw 2 cards, that also makes your odds of autofill slightly higher. Like, it's great, but it's not going to be winning. Ancient Covenant did deserve its taboo, in my opinion, although it was salty as hell at the time it happened, since it was like the one good blessed thing. And it's very, very strong. Especially for, like, if you can get it in a Mystic, like if you're an Agnes in a Blessed team, or if you're a Father Mateo, Ancient Covenant's really appealing. It's just generally the best part of Bless is having someone with Ancient Covenant, but it's still not going to be winning this. And despite Trish being the character print of this expansion, we got the most iconic rogue weapon, the 25 automatic, which is, like, you can argue Switchblade's more iconic, but this is the one that's actually iconic with the rogue method of fighting, which is using your foot and doing clashy stuff. And I'm surprised to find out that this weapon was printed with Trish. It's also very, very good. But yeah, there are only 3 cards that ever stood any chance of winning this. Faustian Bargain, Promise of Power, and Deep Knowledge. They are the 3 curse cards that are the most powerful. Level 0 cards with curses as a downside and then tremendous upside to counterbalance them. That, in fact, was more upside than they needed to be good. Deep Knowledge is draw 3 for 2. Faustian is gain 5 resources for 2, and Promise of Power is 2 unexpected courages for 1. I don't really know which of these is just the strongest. Promise of Power can win games and pass tests that no other level 0 card would. Faustian Bargain single-handedly enables economy better than anything else, and Deep Knowledge is the best draw card in the game. Of the 3, I would say Faustian Bargain being an economy card in green, at a point in time where they already had Easy Mark. You don't really need Faustian Bargain. I think Faustian Bargain has more competition and is less uniquely good than the other 2. I don't think it gets to win, even though it's obviously incredible. For me, it's really between Promise of Power and Deep Knowledge, and I'm gonna just cop out and say it's a tie, because I do not make a Seeker without Deep Knowledge, nor do I make a Mystic without Promise of Power. Those classes just lost card slots in their deck. Those cards are going in and staying in. That's how strong Promise of Power and Deep Knowledge are. To say that either is more powerful than the other is to imply that you can be more powerful than Deep Knowledge. I can't say Promise of Power is better, because that means something is better than Deep Knowledge, and the inverse is true. I can't say Deep Knowledge is better, because that implies something is better than Promise of Power. It's apples to oranges, and these are the nicest damn apples and oranges I've ever seen. Coming over to Edge of the Earth, it's a good thing Cyclopean Hammer got tabooed, because if it didn't, I'd probably just be done looking already. Let me just start by saying Edge of the Earth had a really high power level, and I never really appreciated just how high the power level of Edge of the Earth was compared to previous expansions. It sort of makes sense because I started in Innsmouth. I had no frame of reference for what the average Investigator expansion looked like, and this is the first one where they released it all at once as well. So like, I didn't have an appreciation for just how strong Edge of the Earth was compared to most Investigator expansions. Sweeping Kick's insane. It's just 1 experience, 1 resource is such a low entry cost. Add your foot to your skill value basically says you pass, and this attack deals +1 damage if you succeed trip them. There are so many different ways that this is valuable, but probably chief among them is that a lot of the times you'll find yourself a Guardian fighter in a team with no good foot, and there are certain enemies that you just need to trip, or certain bosses that you cannot kill in 1 turn that will hit you incredibly hard if you don't. Sweeping Kick is just like, it's not just a good way of adding more fighting options to your deck. It doesn't just synergize with a lot of different things, Nacho's ability, the foot discipline, and Lily Chen. There are plenty of ways this combos with stuff. The big thing is this basically is the way to give your Guardian the ability to trip an opponent, and at the same time, it's still within your role, still doing the thing you need to do. You're not like diverging away from your original goal. I think Sweeping Kick's very, very good. I don't think it's going to win because you have cards like Archive of Conduits, which if you've never seen somebody just get wrecked in a game and single-handedly saved by Archive of Conduits, it's a thing of beauty. You have a rogue that's just like been failing Mythos test, they've discarded their whole hand, they're gonna die in the next 3 damage, and your Seeker's just like, fine, I'll give up my whole turn to save you. They play Archive of Conduits and just slam 2 ley lines into them, spend 3 actions to play and then double use this with 2 ley lines to heal them for 4 and have them draw 4 cards. Like, Archive of Conduits is a healing card that just single-handedly saves people who are on death's door. And the fact that it also draws cards is so incredibly good. But I just kind of don't think a healing tool can be broken in the way that other cards can. unless like it's so strong that literally no one on your team can ever die. So despite Archive Conduits being really good, it's niche as a healing card. Like this blows Hallowed Mirror out of the water, but I still don't think healing cards can really be the best cards, just from a game theory standpoint. Eon Chart 4 is just kind of nuts. It's a 3-use Pathfinder that also lets you investigate 3 times when you're using it. It does take up a slot, but it's also a resource cheaper, and there are plenty of ways that Seekers have to just refill the Eon Chart. You could just have one accessory slot and keep replacing Eon Chart with the other Eon Chart in your deck, and you're cycling and redrawing the Eon Chart that you're missing. That's an option. You can use Ariadne's Twine. There are other less efficient ways, but there are more than just those two. Eon Chart's very, very good. I'm not going to mention Janae, by the way, because the taboo kind of fixed her, but Janae is absolutely incredible. Jeremiah Kirby I will mention because a 0-cost ally that regularly draws 2 to 3 cards, like that's the modest expectation. Also, he gives +1 book, because of course he does, he's a Seeker ally. The taboo's kind of sad. I'm not quite sure what it's stopping. Clearly something broken happened somewhere, but I don't think it really affects Jeremiah Kirby in honest situations where you're playing him normally. So Jeremiah Kirby's very, very good. He has no chance of winning though. And this is more of an honorable mention of a card I really like. Survey the Area it just says your Seeker can't fail a foot check. That's all it does, but for Seekers like Harvey, where foot is their Achilles heel, the existence of this card is a huge boon that they got from Edge of the Earth. Black Market's insane. It needed to get tabooed to max once per round, although again, I will say it should be limit once per round. There's no reason that 2 rogues can't both be playing Black Markets. This is just like, I'll tell you straight up, if I were playing with my tabletop group, we would just say that says limit. We would never respect that. Or maybe limit once per round per investigator because they're worried about doing the rotating Black Market thing. Doesn't matter what you do, but max once per round making it cross investigator is silly. Regardless, Black Market's an incredible card. If you build your deck around it, this essentially says draw 5, but it's better than that. Black Market's very, very good, but it isn't something that every rogue wants. It's something you have to build into. And something that every rogue does want is Savant. This is just Promise of Power for rogues, except it can sometimes be better than that, and it doesn't add a curse. It's particularly broken in big money rogues who are going to have +3 to all of their stats. This double dipping into Omni stat boost is really strong. But just in general, every rogue that has a crippling head weakness, their second lowest stats higher than a 2, making this Promise of Power without a downside, and they needed Promise of Power in a way that very few characters do because of that head weakness. Savant is easily more important to rogues in general than either Black Market or Black Fan. I think for me it ends up going to Eon Chart 4. This is something that most Seekers can break in half, and if they're not breaking it in half, it's because they're choosing to do something equally degenerate instead of this. I think it's very close between this and, frankly, Janae should have been on the list. It's close between this and Janae and Savant for me, but I'm going to give it to Eon Chart 4. If only because I don't think breaking scenarios with Janae is a power level thing so much as a failure of design. But if you view just breaking a scenario in half because Janae wasn't planned for as power, then you could argue Janae should have won. I don't view it that way. I think that's just a problem, but Eon Chart's very close before that. I'm giving it to Eon Chart. Let's move on to Scarlet Keys. I forgot Runic Axe existed when I started this video. We can stop. We don't have to look at the rest of the cards in Scarlet Keys. I'm gonna keep going. Like, I was having a good time when I was clicking on the first cards. I was like, oh, Garish and Guard Dog, these will be fun things to mention. Bestow Resolve as well. Like, these are very powerful cards that aren't gonna win, but they're cool honorable mentions. Then I scrolled down to Runic Axe and just, oh God, why? I will say, despite Clue Dropper being a strong archetype, I'm not opening any cards for it because it's gonna suffer the big money problem where individually the cards aren't good enough. It's about having a critical mass of like-minded cards. So like I was saying a second ago, Bestow Resolve's a really cool card. It opens up a lot of interesting things for support guardians, and it's actually sort of pseudo-draw because it allows you to more freely use the neutral skills that draw cards. That said, Bestow Resolve doesn't have anywhere near the power level to compete with the cards from this set. Girish Kadakia is very, very good, but at 4 experience, he's hard to fit into a lot of decks. It's a strong card, very definitely, but it's just a little bit too costly on resources and experience and in a very contested slot to really stand a chance of winning. Because you have stuff like Guard Dog, for 1 less resource and 2 less experience, you get Lightning Bolt engages that immediately trigger reflect damage, as well as 4/2 soak. This is absolutely top tier. This is like Beat Cop 2 levels of fighting ally quality. It's very, very, very good. But if we're going to talk about Guardian fighting methods that cost experience, let's just go to the clear winner of that category. It's the Runic Axe. Coming down to its inscriptions, you only need to read the bottom 3 if you're a fighter. You imbue the same inscription up to 3 times, you get 2 charges per turn instead of 1, and for every charge spent, you may imbue the axe with up to 2 different inscriptions. We're only using the basic inscriptions as a fighter. Every time you spend a charge, you get +2 to hit and +1 to damage. So this has a base +1 to hit as well. It is a 2-handed 4-cost asset that swings at +3 for 2 damage. That is really, really good. Like, those are very reliable numbers. But if an enemy happens to have 3 health, you just spend an extra charge and he dies in 1 hit and you're swinging at +5 now. And every turn you get 2 charges back. And you might be kind of sketched out about that if it's your first time looking at a Runic Axe. Here's the math. If you swing 3 times with 1 charge each, you get onto 1 charge. Next turn you get 2. Do it again, down to 0 charges. Next turn you get 2. On the 3rd turn, on your 3rd action, you will run out of charges if you're swinging at 1 charge each, which is the most damage per charge because of the base damage from the attack. So if you run out of Runic Axe charges, pretty much always it's a misplay. Very rarely are you in a scenario with that much fighting. But I will remind you that cards like Sweeping Kick exist. Cards like Brandigathuga exist. There are cards, I absolutely should have mentioned Brandigathuga during Edge of the Earth, it just went right past me somehow. But there are cards that supplement Runic Axe's charges, making this a complete non-issue. It may as well be unlimited. Runic Axe is probably the best fight tool in the game. The ability to spend 3 charges and hit for 4, Vicious Blow for 5, and one-shot the Mindless Dancer. You can use cards like Strong Armed on your 3-charge attacks, by the way, to guarantee you don't hit an auto-fail now. Runic Axe is just absolutely disgustingly powerful, the best weapon in the game. I don't know that there's going to be a way to fix Runic Axe that doesn't kill it, because, like, what do? Taboo Script Weave to 5 or Ancient Power to 5? Like, if you taboo any of this stuff, you break the fight variant of the weapon. I don't know how to fix Runic Axe, I just know that it is the best weapon in the game right now, and it's not even close. And also, there's a flex build where you give up Saga, you use the axe more rarely, and you take Inscription of the Elders so that you can get clues by killing enemies. Runic Axe is going to be the winner of this set. There's no shot that it loses, but I want to give an honorable mention to the absolute shitload of cards I haven't yet talked about that are monstrously powerful cards that went on to define archetypes. Grim Memoir doesn't define an archetype, it's just really good. It's just either pass 4 test or draw 4 cards, depending on whether or not you needed the +2 book. And it's not that expensive, and it's in Seeker, so, like, yeah, just give me more reliability, more card draw. I can spare a hand slot, it's not a problem. It's just a very good throughput. Analysis gives the Seeker the ability to, 1, put a better skill to fill out the practice makes perfect, but 2, cancel auto-fails on incredibly important tests. You don't want to drop clues, but you can if you need to, because auto-fail is worse. Speaking of dropping clues, William T. Mailson is Gloria in the ally asset. His ability is incredible. 1 cost for 2/2 soak is just not an acceptable rate. Like, I don't understand why this is a 2 experience card that anyone with Seeker access can get. He's kind of ridiculous. Yeah, Mailson's just an incredible Mythos Resilience card that very few cards compete with. And moving on to directly crazily powerful cards, At a Crossroads is Deep Knowledge that doesn't put curses in the bag, but you have to play it in certain timing windows and cannot choose to hold it. Like, those restrictions probably make it about as good as Deep Knowledge, and its 1 experience cost is really the not a Seeker tax, more than this card being imbalanced at 0 compared to Deep Knowledge. This is just some of the best draw in the game, and yeah, that's really important. This is the breaking point where Survivor went from having pretty good draw to being almost as good as Seeker. Speaking of being almost as good as Seeker, Shadowlight made Survivors really good at finding clues. They started edging on Yellow's territory, got the taboo immediately. Still, even with the taboo at 2 experience, this card is worth mentioning for being incredibly strong and the reason that difficulty 0 is worth playing. And it saddens me that Dirty Fighting doesn't get to win against Runic Axe, because Dirty Fighting is one of my favorite cards in the game. This revitalized every single 3-fist rogue fighter, because all of them had 4 foot. Actually, Winifred had 5. Dirty Fighting is a card that lets someone who's good at evading but mediocre to bad at fighting translate that evasion attempt, immediately refund the action into a fighting attempt, and then get +2 on all of their fights. It's incredibly, incredibly good. I can't overstate how elegant the design is for finding a way to massively elevate every rogue except Tony Morgan when it comes to fighting. It feels thematically on point. It's just a really, really good card that is so core to so many rogues. In terms of raw power level, it's not beating a Runic Axe, man, it just isn't. And I'm gonna be a little bit less confident when it comes to saying what I think the most powerful card from Hemlock Vale was, just because I have a lot less experience with that than the other expansions, but let's give it our best shot. I'll say that I think, generally speaking, the power level in Hemlock Vale was not nearly as high as previous expansions. There are some honorable mention cards that I really like that they exist, though I don't think they have any shot of winning, stuff like Cleaning Kit really helping out on big gun archetypes. There are several masks that are absolutely worth a mention that help out their archetype specifically. Pretty much any Guardian with 4 fists is at least considering a wolf mask. Fox Mask for rogues is a tremendous push for any Foot Matters character that matters just like tremendously. This represents 2+ copies of manual decks in a class that desperately needs every foot icon it can get, because actually making sure you pass the pilfer check is the most important part of the character, and then the rest of the stuff you're doing is still using that same foot stat that's relatively hard to increase. So like, this is just so important for rogues. Even though its power level isn't insanely high, the power it offers is core to an archetype that needs it. And then Sparrow Mask is arguably one of the best Mythos Resilience cards in the game, just 1-cost slotless asset basically, and it gives you guts or manual decks recursively. Like, it replenishes when you need it because the things dealing damage and or horror are the things you're taking tests on, right? So Sparrow Mask is insane. In terms of the mask, I think it's the most independently powerful one that applies to the most investigators, and it was something I was really considering for first place. There are also a couple of +1 damage skills with Longshot and Strong Armed. Longshot obviously is just generally good. Survivor struggles for action compression, and additionally, not so much the ability to put this to other tests, but the fact that it is a practice skill can matter. Strong Armed, in my opinion, is a much better one. It doesn't apply to every fight test. You have to be using melee or range. This is specifically not for big guns, but that does mean you can use it on any important check. It's a vicious blow that can't auto-fail, and most importantly, I would argue, you can use it on a Runic Axe that's spending charges, so that you can't run the risk of auto-failing a 3-charge swing and finding yourself in a really rough spot. So Strong Armed is like on par with Sparrow Mask in contention for winning right now for me. But the card that actually wins is Ravenous Myconid Carnivorous Strain. There's like a really cool specific combo Kate build that reduces the Shroud of her location to 0 with Sentient Strain and Breach the Door, so that you can just negate every Mythos card drawn at your location, which is very silly, but that's not a generally applicable use. The Carnivorous Strain is generally applicable. This is a 2-cost slotless asset that you can use as soak if you somehow need it, but Seekers rarely will find themselves in a situation where they have to kill a Ravenous Myconid. This card didn't need to offer soak, it didn't need to cost you, it's just cheap and has soak because Seeker cards are not overcosted, overstated, over-budgeted. It lets you Lightning Bolt the Uncanny Growth into your hand, which is a 1-cost event that investigates, and you get a number of growths equal to how much you succeed by. Then you can just Lightning Bolt kill any non-elite enemy by spending all the growths on Ravenous Myconid if it had more growths than they had health. It's very easy to just have Ravenous Myconid say kill an enemy every turn. It just eats them. It's better at fighting than any fighter until you encounter an elite enemy. It requires that you get Ravenous Myconid out, and it's limit 1 per deck. And it requires that you already have the growths on the Ravenous Myconid before the enemy spawns. That's all true. But it's very normal for like you to have a Harvey on your team who's got a Ravenous Myconid and a Farsight, and he's just constantly farsighting out the Uncanny Growth and then eating a guy every turn. And sure, Harvey's gonna be the best at this because he's the best at drawing. This is an untutorable one of. But there are plenty of other Seekers that will find this relatively quickly, and sure, they won't farsight out the Uncanny Growth. It'll just be a normal investigate that costs 1 instead of a fast action investigate. But the fact is that for 4 experience, you're basically giving your Seeker an ability to kill pretty much anything that's not a core part of the scenario. That's usually what elite means. It's not just a big guy, it's a core part of the scenario. I was gonna search and show a handful of enemies that are all just like very scary enemies, but I don't want to include a bunch of random spoilers in this video. So instead I'll just say that there are tons of enemies that are like 4 health victory enemies, or 5 health, or even 6 health, that are non-elite. It's pretty easy to have a Ravenous Myconid eat those guys. And it's deeply frustrating as your fighter to know that spending your resources is wrong when your Kluber can kill something for free instead. And unlike Occult Lexicon, where there are real concessions about deck building that have to go into your deck if you're running an Occult Lexicon and trying to fight with it, and you're still giving up your turn to play the Blood Rites, Ravenous Myconid can go into pretty much any deck, cost almost nothing by comparison. When I first saw this, I was like, Seekers already do this, it's not that offensive, it's not that much worse than Blood Rites. But since then, I've gotten a more realistic valuing of Blood Rite. I think it's not as broken as I once did, and Ravenous Myconid is everything I ever feared Blood Rite was and more. I think Ravenous Myconid was the card that put Occult Lexicon into perspective, where I realized that I was exaggerating, because I saw what I was really talking about when I hyped up Blood Rites, and it was Ravenous Myconid. This card's a problem. This is not okay. There's no way to taboo this to be okay. This is not good. This is just like Runic Axe was #1 by landslide and I hated it last expansion. Ravenous Myconid Carnivorous Strain is #1 by a landslide this expansion, and I'm not thrilled about it. Anyways, that'll be all for now. I've been Rather Incoherent. I hope you enjoyed listening to me ramble about what I think the best cards of each expansion were, and I'll see you in the next one.